My name is Ursula Uri Kane. I am 34 years old, a commissioned officer in the United States Army, and I have spent my entire adult life serving my country in places most people will never see. I have carried out missions that never made the news, missions where one wrong move could collapse the safety of an entire city. People once called me a ghost because I could vanish into shadows and return with the answers no one else could find. But that night, standing in the Great Hall of the Pentagon, I was anything but invisible. I was the center of a storm I never saw coming. The room was packed with senior officers. Dozens of uniforms lined the aisles, ribbons and stars glinting beneath harsh white lights. I had just returned from a mission overseas that had pushed every limit of my body and mind. My orders had been classified. My debriefing had been private. I had done everything by the book. Yet when my father, General Harris, stepped up to the podium, I saw something in his face I had not seen since I was a child. Raw, uncontrolled rage. "You're a traitor," he thundered, his voice echoing through the vaulted chamber. My heart clenched. For a moment I thought I had misheard him. My father was one of the most decorated generals in the Army. He was also the man who raised me to value duty above all else. Now, before hundreds of our peers, he was accusing me of betraying the country I had nearly died for. A hush fell over the hall. My father stepped down from the podium, crossing the space between us with heavy, deliberate strides. He grabbed the collar of my uniform and tore the rank insignia from my shoulders with his own hands. The sound of ripping fabric was deafening in the silence. One by one, he stripped away the patches, the ribbons, the symbols of my service. His hands shook with fury. I stood motionless, staring straight ahead, refusing to let them see me break. Then it happened. His fingers caught on the back of my jacket and yanked so hard that the seam split. A sliver of air hit the skin of my upper back, and for the briefest moment, I felt the room shift. They had seen it, the edge of a tattoo I had kept hidden for years. It was only a fraction of the design, but it was enough to freeze the whispers on everyone's lips. I could have explained right then. I could have begged him to stop. But I didn't. Instead, I reached up, unclipped the remaining fasteners, and slowly slid the torn jacket from my shoulders. The fabric fell in a heap at my feet. I turned my back on the audience and let them see the full tattoo at last. It stretched across my shoulder blades, a black and silver emblem of wings framing a single star. Those who knew, knew. It was the classified insignia of the Orion Phantom Unit, an ultra-black operations group that officially had not existed for more than a decade. Gasps rippled through the crowd. One voice rose above the rest. "Is that even possible?" someone whispered. Another hissed. "Only the president can activate Orion. Only legends ever wore that mark." I stayed silent, my breathing slow and steady. The weight of 100 stares pressed against me, but I refused to flinch. My father's jaw was tight with confusion now, the anger draining from his face as the truth crept in. Yet he still barked the next order out of habit, out of pride. "Guards, arrest her immediately!" No one moved. The standstill stretched into eternity. Then a chair scraped loudly at the front of the room. Admiral Rowe, the highest-ranking naval officer present, rose to his feet. He was a man known for his composure, for never showing fear. But when his eyes met mine and then traveled to the tattoo blazing across my back, I saw his breath catch. "Sir," he said slowly, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Oh God, she outranks you?" The words landed like a detonation. My father's face turned ghostly pale. Murmurs erupted, a tide of disbelief surging through the crowd. Someone muttered, "Orion Phantom Unit was dissolved more than 10 years ago. How could she?" Another said, "If she's Orion, she reports directly to the president. No one here can touch her." I bent down, picked up the torn jacket, and held it loosely in my hands. A young security officer stepped forward silently, offering me a fresh coat from his own shoulders. I nodded my thanks and slipped it on without a word. My movements were deliberate, calm, as though I were still on the battlefield. I could feel my father's eyes burning into me, but I didn't look at him. Not yet. Admiral Rowe cleared his throat, commanding silence again. "This proceeding is suspended effective immediately," he declared. "We will verify the facts before any further action is taken." My father bristled, his pride unwilling to back down even now. "Admiral, you cannot just—" "I can," Rowe cut him off, and I will. "If Captain Kane is indeed Orion, you have no jurisdiction over her. None of us do." I caught the flicker of uncertainty in my father's expression. He had built his entire career on absolute control, and now the control was slipping through his fingers. He wanted to shout, to order the guards to act, but even the soldiers at the edges of the room had frozen in place. No one wanted to be the one to touch a member of Orion. Rowe stepped closer to me. His voice dropped to a lower register, meant only for my ears. "You need to come with me, for your safety and for theirs," he said, nodding toward the restless crowd. "We have a secure area prepared." I nodded once, not trusting myself to speak. A pair of security officers fell into step beside me, not as captors, but as escorts. We left the hall together, the echo of our boots clanging in the corridor. As we walked, I caught fragments of the murmurs behind us. Was she really Orion? That would mean, do you think she betrayed the unit? No one betrays Orion and lives. Inside, my mind was already moving faster than my feet. Rowe might be trying to protect me, or he might be moving me somewhere I could be silenced without witnesses. Either way, I had to stay alive long enough to uncover who had set me up. We reached the secure wing of the Pentagon, a place few had clearance to enter. The walls here were thicker, the lights colder, the silence absolute. Rowe stopped outside a reinforced steel door and looked at me carefully. "You understand this is not a cell," he said, "but until we understand what's happening, you need to remain here." I met his gaze steadily. "I understand, but know this, Admiral. I will find out who's behind this, and when I do, they'll wish they had never heard my call sign." He gave a short nod, his jaw tight. "Valkyrie," he whispered, the name half respectful, half afraid. Then the door sealed shut behind me. I leaned against the wall, letting the silence settle. For the first time, I allowed myself to exhale. That was the moment I realized the truth. The entire world believed I was a traitor, and unless I could uncover the real enemy, they would be right. "That was the first moment," I said quietly into the empty room, "when the world thought I was the villain. But I knew I had to survive, and I had to turn the entire board upside down." The steel door shut behind me with a dull final thud. I stood still for a moment, letting my eyes adjust to the sterile glow of the isolation chamber. It was small, no more than 12 feet by 12 feet. The walls painted a flat, featureless gray. A single fluorescent light flickered overhead, buzzing faintly like an insect trapped in a jar. The air was cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms. There was no window, no clock, and no sound beyond the hum of the ventilation system. I knew exactly what this was. A containment room inside the Pentagon's secure wing was not a cell, but it might as well have been. Its design was deliberate. Strip away all distractions, leave the occupant alone with their thoughts until those thoughts became weapons turned inward. It was meant to break someone slowly, but I was not someone who broke easily. I sat down on the metal bench, bolted to the wall, and clasped my hands in front of me, forcing my breathing into a steady rhythm. I had been given no explanation, no timetable, only Admiral Rowe's vague assurance that I was being kept safe. I doubted even he knew what would happen next. There were no lawyers, no briefings, no guarantees. I was alone. That word, alone, always carried me backward. My mind reached for the past, for the place where everything had begun. I closed my eyes, and I was 19 again, standing on a rain-slicked tarmac at Fort Bragg, a single duffel bag at my feet, and no one to see me off. I remembered the recruiter's words echoing in my ears. "You'll disappear into a program that doesn't exist. Do you understand the cost?" I had understood, and I had still signed my name, Orion Phantom Unit. Even now, just thinking the name sent a shiver through me. We were ghosts. We had no ranks, no service records, no official identities. The world believed we had been dissolved a decade ago, and that was exactly the point. We were the contingency no one wanted to admit existed. A surgical team of assassins, infiltrators, and saboteurs who could operate without oversight when the nation's security was at stake. The training had been brutal. We slept 4 hours a night if we were lucky. Our bodies were torn down and rebuilt from scratch. My weapon was the rifle, and my instructors pushed me until the crosshairs were as natural to me as breathing. I could hit a moving target at 1,000 yards in wind or rain with no second chance. They called me Valkyrie after my first live mission. I had been 19 years old and already carried the lives of 10 men on my trigger finger. I opened my eyes, pulling myself back into the present, but the memories kept bleeding in. The faces of my Orion teammates flashed behind my eyelids. Mackenzie, the communications wizard who could hack into anything with a signal. Reyes, who could dismantle a bomb blindfolded. Chen, the medic who patched me up more times than I could count. We had been a family forged in fire, loyal to one another in ways the outside world would never understand. And then one day, without warning, Orion had vanished. The unit was disbanded, the survivors dispersed, the files buried so deep they might as well have been burned. But I had never left, not truly. Orion had left its mark on me, literally. The tattoo on my back was a symbol known only to those who had earned it. It was not decoration. It was a warning. Anyone who recognized it understood the price of crossing someone like me. And now that Mark had been revealed in the most public way possible, I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. Someone had orchestrated this. My father's outburst in the Great Hall had been too sudden, too theatrical. He believed I had betrayed the country. But who had planted that belief? Who had whispered in his ear? My gut told me the same enemies I had faced in Orion's Shadow Wars were moving again, pulling strings from the dark. The light above me flickered harder, casting the room into momentary blackness before buzzing back to life. My reflection stared back at me from the polished steel of the door. I barely recognized the woman I saw, jaw set, eyes sharp, shoulders still squared even in solitude. I had only a few hours, maybe less, before someone decided what to do with me. I could wait here and let them decide, or I could start assembling the pieces myself. The past was coming for me, but I was no longer the 19-year-old girl who had stepped onto that tarmac alone. I straightened slowly, every muscle coiled with purpose. If my enemies wanted to drag me back into the shadows, I would meet them there. And this time, I would bring the light. I could picture my father, even without being in the same room. General Harris, the man whose voice could silence an entire command center, was undoubtedly pacing the length of his office at that very moment. Every surface in that room was sharp, immaculate, a reflection of the man himself. He believed in order, he believed in control, and he believed beyond all doubt that I had betrayed the very institution he had dedicated his life to. From the isolation chamber, I imagined him hunched over classified reports, his jaw locked as he reread the casualty counts from the last mission. That operation had cost lives, good men and women who would not be coming home, and someone had leaked intelligence that compromised the entire team. He was convinced that someone was me. To him, it made perfect sense. I had returned from a mission earlier than expected, without the fanfare of a debriefing. My commanding officers could not access my full orders because they were sealed under Orion's classification protocols. And then there was the tattoo. To most, it was nothing more than a relic from a disbanded unit. To my father, it was a symbol of secrets, of loyalties he could not control. I closed my eyes and felt the familiar ache in my chest. My father and I had always lived in different worlds, even as we wore the same uniform. From the time I was a child, he treated me less like a daughter and more like a soldier in training. I still remembered standing at attention in our backyard when I was 8 years old, my tiny feet planted in the grass as he barked instructions about posture, discipline, and honor. He told me once that the Kane family name was a torch, and I was expected to carry it without ever letting it fall. At first, I tried. I studied hard, earned top scores at the academy, won marksmanship competitions just to see the rare flicker of pride in his eyes. But pride from General Harris was always conditional. When I graduated early, he called it expected. When I volunteered for my first deployment at 19, he didn't ask if I was ready. He simply said, "Don't embarrass me." The memory shifted into a flashback so vivid, it was like stepping through a door. I was 19 again, packing my gear in the dim barracks at Fort Bragg. My father had stopped by unexpectedly, towering in the doorway like a shadow. "You don't have to go," he had said, his voice low. But it wasn't concern I heard. It was warning. "If you go, you'd better come back with results. The Kane name doesn't tolerate failure." "I know, sir," I had replied automatically. I didn't call him Dad. That word hadn't felt natural on my tongue for years. He'd stepped closer then, adjusting the strap on my pack like I was one of his soldiers. "You're smart, Yuri. Don't get soft out there. There's no room for weakness in this family." Those words had burned into me as I boarded the transport plane. I didn't realize it at the time, but that was the day I stopped trying to win his approval. Somewhere between the explosions and the silence of sniper nests, I learned that my life couldn't revolve around a man who saw me only as an extension of his legacy. Back in the present, I imagined him now, fists clenched as he rewatched surveillance footage from the mission that had gone wrong. He would be fixating on every angle, searching for proof that I had betrayed him, betrayed the country, betrayed the family name. That was how he justified what he'd done in the Great Hall, stripping me of my insignia in front of hundreds of officers. In his mind, he was protecting the institution. He didn't see it as humiliating me. He saw it as upholding the standard he believed in. But the truth was, my father didn't know me anymore. He didn't know what I'd endured with Orion. He didn't know the things I had done to keep this country safe, the ghosts I carried on my shoulders. And now, because he refused to see beyond his own belief in my guilt, he had become a weapon in someone else's game. I leaned back against the cold wall of the isolation chamber and let the thought settle. If I wanted to survive this, I couldn't just clear my name. I would have to expose the shadow that had convinced my father I was a traitor. And somewhere deep inside me, a voice I hadn't heard in years whispered, "You'll have to face him again, and this time, you can't afford to lose." The door to the isolation chamber opened with a mechanical hiss, and I immediately recognized the man who stepped in. Admiral Rowe didn't need introduction. His reputation preceded him. He was the highest-ranking officer in the room earlier, the one whose voice had silenced the chaos when my tattoo was revealed. He carried the weight of decades in service, his uniform immaculate, every ribbon perfectly aligned. But his eyes were what struck me. They were calculating yet cautious, like a man approaching a weapon he wasn't sure was loaded. He dismissed the two security personnel with a flick of his hand, waiting until the door sealed shut behind them before he spoke. "Captain," he stopped himself, correcting the address. "Ursula Kane. Or should I call you by your call sign, Valkyrie?" The name, long buried, sent a ripple down my spine. But I didn't flinch. "You can call me whatever you need to, Admiral," I said evenly. My voice didn't betray the storm building beneath the surface. He stepped closer, boots echoing against the tile, his hands clasped behind his back. I need you to understand the position you're in, he said. If you truly are a surviving member of Orion Phantom Unit, then you are a national asset. One of the last of a unit so classified that even the president must tread carefully to invoke it. But if you've betrayed us, if you're responsible for what happened on that last mission, then I will personally give the order to end your life. Do you understand me, Kane? I met his stare head on. I understand you perfectly. But you need to understand something too, Admiral. Whether you think I'm an asset or a liability doesn't change reality. And reality is that the real traitor is out there, sitting comfortably in a room full of officers who have no idea how deeply they've been compromised. Rowe's jaw tightened. He wasn't accustomed to being challenged. Those are heavy accusations, Captain. You'll need more than defiance to convince me. I'm not here to convince you, I said, my voice calm. I'm here to survive and to finish what Orion started. His brows drew together as he studied me, perhaps weighing whether I was reckless or deliberate. Your father believes you leaked classified intel that cost American lives, he said slowly. He's not the only one. You disappeared off the grid for 36 hours after the operation. That alone raises questions. I let the accusation hang in the air, my silence deliberate, and then I leaned forward slightly. You've read my sealed record, Admiral. You know Orion's directives. Disappearances happen because our missions require it. But you also know what I was trained for. If I wanted to vanish forever, I would have. I'm here because someone wants me silenced, and they're using my father as their blunt instrument. The mention of my father unsettled him, though he masked it well. General Harris has a reputation for being uncompromising, but he believes in the chain of command, Rowe said. No, I corrected him. He believes in control, and right now he's being controlled by someone who understands his blind spots, someone who knows his pride will make him act without asking the right questions. For the first time, Admiral Rowe's expression softened, just slightly. He was seeing the pattern I had already pieced together. You're saying your father is being manipulated, he said. I'm saying there's a traitor playing a very long game, I replied. They're hiding in plain sight, and the easiest way to cover their tracks is to make me the scapegoat. I don't need you to trust me, Admiral. I need you to open your eyes before they bury both of us. Rowe remained silent for a long beat, the tension in the room palpable. Then he spoke, his voice low. If you're right, we're dealing with something far larger than I realized. But if you're wrong, he let the threat hang, deliberate. I'm not wrong, I said, and if you want to find the truth, you'll need me alive. His gaze held mine a moment longer before he finally nodded. You'll remain in protective isolation, he said. For your safety and for the safety of this entire command, I'll begin an independent review of the intelligence failure. But understand this, Kane. If I find even a shred of evidence that you betrayed us, I will not hesitate. I allowed a small nod, masking the rush of determination that coursed through me. Understood, Admiral. But you'll find something else. And when you do, you're going to realize we don't have much time left. He turned sharply, the door sliding open once again. Before he stepped out, he looked back over his shoulder. You'd better hope you're right, Valkyrie. When the door shut behind him, the room was silent again. But my mind was anything but. I knew I had just bought myself time, maybe hours, maybe days. But it wasn't enough. Someone had orchestrated this entire spectacle to destroy me. And the longer I sat in that room, the closer they were to succeeding. I leaned against the cold wall, letting my breath steady, the name Valkyrie echoing in my ears. They wanted me forgotten. They wanted me erased. But I wasn't going anywhere. When the door sealed, I hit the call panel. I am invoking counsel, I said. I request Ethan Cole, former Orion legal advisor under special access. Record this as preservation of privilege and operational integrity. The intercom went silent. 10 minutes later, Admiral Rowe entered with a tablet. You are certain about Cole? He asked. He left government and avoids attention. He is the only attorney who knows Orion procedures without a briefing, I said. He understands how we documented actions when paper could not exist. If I was framed, the proof sits in those shadow ledgers. Rowe searched my face, then nodded. I will authorize contact. He will meet you here under sealed conditions. If his review contradicts you, I send you to tribunal. Understood. He left. I rebuilt the mission in my head. Tasking order, encrypted handshakes, the courier late by 9 minutes, a decoy convoy that never appeared on satellite. The second, the net turned to snow. Somewhere in that chain, a hand pushed us toward failure. An hour later, 2 plainclothes agents brought in a man who wore fatigue like a suit. Ethan Cole looked older. His eyes were unchanged. Attorney-client privilege attaches, he said. Everyone else out. They checked Rowe's order and cleared the room. Ethan sat across from me, opened a worn leather folder, and kept his voice measured. Tell me what they think you did, then tell me what you did. I laid out the mission in clean lines. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he produced a slim gray notebook stamped with a faded Orion crest. Contingency journals, he said, parallel logs, one coded for counsel, one in the clear. Your team's last sealed entries were kept under litigation hold. Few knew they existed. He slid the notebook to me. On page 3, my block print flagged a logistics contractor named Calder, custodian of movement authorities. I had underlined one anomaly and then forgotten it. His badge scanned at opposite ends of the depot within 8 minutes. Impossible without a duplicate credential or a partner with cloned access. Ethan tapped the underline. You write like a sniper. No adjectives, only ranges. If we corroborate this, we have another suspect. The intercom buzzed. Admiral, the feeds are exploding, the watch officer said. Rowe returned with his tablet. A headline roared. Former Black program operative suspected in insider leak. Sources say Pentagon legend under review. A split screen showed my academy photo beside images from the hall. The ticker chewed, and the crowd split along reflex lines. The country loves myths until a single word makes them flinch. Traitor. Rowe's tone went steel. The leak came from inside. Damage control is underway. The storm will crest by nightfall. He looked at us. You know what that means. It means the architect is burning the house to smoke me out, I said. We place a counterweight before the narrative hardens. Ethan nodded. We file an emergency preservation order. Compel logistics to freeze access logs for the 36-hour window. Then we brief the Inspector General in camera about the contingency journals. We do not surrender copies. We show enough to prove chain. Do it, Rowe said. I will clear the lane. He stepped out to make calls. Ethan leaned in. Yuri, your father will double down. He will not help us until proof is brutal. I know. He has always mistaken force for clarity. Then let us give him clarity, Ethan said. I want your original field notes, any non-standard media you used. You kept those habits even when command told you to stop. They live here, I said, tapping my temple. But you can seize one thing today. 2 days before tasking, Calder requested a midnight override at the depot and blamed a software patch. The request carried my father's digital countersignature, not his hand, his stamp. If someone spoofed it, we have a forgery. If he approved without reading, we have negligence. Either way, it opens a door. Ethan wrote quickly. Rowe returned and handed him a badge. You are cleared to serve orders and pull logs under my authority, the Admiral said. Move fast. The press is circling. He left. Ethan slipped his pad away. Survival is not the win, he said. Vindication is. If you want both, let me do the slow work while you prepare for when the truth surfaces. I stood. Then we make the proof undeniable, I said, "and we do it before the sun goes down." Ethan arrived before dawn with a sealed laptop and the look he wore in court when a witness had just lied. He waited for the door to latch, set the machine on the table, and spoke in a voice meant for transcripts. "Someone is staging your fall. The crime scene is synthetic. The timeline is counterfeit." "Show me," I said. He opened a local archive. No network, no chance for a wipe. First, the depot access logs tied to the operation. Your courier's entry shows at 0207 and again at 0211 on opposite doors 90 meters apart. Humanly impossible. Also physically impossible, because the second door's magnetic seal still shows a tamper flag from the previous inspection. The software cleared the flag, the hardware never reset. That mismatch is gold. He tapped a second window. The video feeds that should match those entries were scrubbed and re-encoded. The audio track was replaced with a loop of distant forklift noise to hide the splice. Our expert compared the encoder signatures. The facility uses a Pelco H260 profile. The doctored clips carry a generic FFmpeg profile at a bitrate the system cannot produce. Whoever did this counted on speed and fear. They forgot the small math. I felt my shoulders loosen, not from relief but alignment. "What else? Badge events on your account after the mission," Ethan continued. "At 0440, your credential pings a restricted server room. Problem: your badge was in an evidence envelope signed by the duty officer at 0432. I pulled the envelope from storage. The tamper seal shows heat warping. The adhesive underlayer is bubbled. Someone used a pocket heater to lift it, then pressed it back with a roller. Sloppy, but not obvious unless you run a UV pass." He switched to a log viewer. The security information and event management system clocks are synced by GPS. The depot time server is not. We found a drift of 9 seconds. The forger aligned events to the wrong clock. When you reconcile everything to GPS, their perfect sequence stutters. It is like a metronome that skips a beat. "Roe will ask for a name," I said. "We are circling one," Ethan replied. "Calder, logistics." He submitted a midnight override 2 days before the tasking. The request carried your father's digital counter signature. We examined the cryptographic hash. The signature validates. The key store says it issued the token. But the key store audit log is missing one line from that hour. The gap is exactly 1 second. Only a console admin with physical access can pause the daemon and dump it without tripping the alert. That is a ghost admin. Either Calder had help or he is the help. "What about the attack itself?" I asked. "Prove the intel route was poisoned and the leak points away from me." Ethan opened packet captures from the mission prep net. A single outbound burst from a maintenance workstation at U32 harmless, except the workstation's network interface was disabled in software that week for patching. The burst wrote a management out-of-band channel that only vendors use. We subpoenaed the vendor's records. Someone authenticated with a field engineer token, which was reported stolen 6 months ago. Embedded in the payload is a salt string we recognize from a previous Orion compromise attempt. Same actor, same vanity tell. The same actor also made your father look inattentive by pushing that counter signature into his queue at the end of a briefing block when he approves routine items in batches. I stood and paced the small room to bleed the static from my muscles. The floor felt level again. "Who else knows?" "Just us and the Admiral," Ethan said. "He has ordered preservation across 3 systems and quarantined the depot time server." He also had public affairs push a bland statement about standard review procedures. It will not stop the chatter, but it buys a cycle. Another window, another blow. Ethan brought up a still frame from a corridor camera near the server room. The image showed a figure in a cap and mask. Unhelpful, except for a habit too specific to ignore. The person carried their clipboard by the bottom edge with the thumb on top, palm facing out. I had seen that grip in 100 briefings. The hand told me what the face hid. "You think it is Calder?" I said. "I think it is someone who learned to copy calm," Ethan answered. "Look at the sleeve. The cuff is taped to stop snagging inside a rack. That is a tech habit. Calder is administrative. He does not tape cuffs. He outsources touch work. But the clipboard shows a laminated route tag from the courier cage. Only 2 people can sign those at that hour. Calder is one. The other is Master Sergeant Leeds. Leeds maintained the badge printers and the cage locks. He also shot beside me at the range and never missed his reload checks. He would not risk a sloppy seal. He would not forget UV, unless he wanted us to see it. Ethan smiled without humor. Exactly. This is bait shaped like certainty. If we sprint at Leeds, the real hand cleans Calder and scrubs the key store. We need to lock them both without declaring which one scares us. So we set a trap, I said. We seed a new narrative into the system. We publish a dummy after action addendum that includes a decoy checksum only the saboteur would try to correct. We watch who touches it and how. And we move you, Ethan added. The leak has made you a symbol. Symbols get targeted. Roe can shift you to a compartment inside Navy Intel for 72 hours under a medical pretense. Your father will fight it. Let him. The noise will hide the move. I looked at the map in my head. The lanes, the angles, the shot that matters. Do it. And Ethan. He waited. When this lands, I want the proof to teach. Not just punish. Prevent. He nodded once. Then he went to make it real. Ethan sat across from me, pen frozen above his notepad, when I said the name out loud. Orion Phantom Unit wasn't just a ghost story. We existed. And 10 years ago, we dismantled something that was never supposed to surface. Admiral Roe shifted in his chair, the faintest crack in his usually unshakable composure. You're saying this ties back to an operation from a decade ago. What kind of operation? I leaned forward, resting my hands flat on the steel table so he could see I wasn't hiding. Weapon smuggling, sir, but not just rogue dealers. We were tasked to penetrate a chain that linked cartel buyers to corrupt intermediaries in multiple governments. That chain reached into the Pentagon itself. We recovered manifests that pointed to senior officers, authorizing covert sales of next-generation weapons to fund black projects off the books. We intercepted the cargo and shut it down. At least, we thought we did. Ethan's pen scratched a line across the paper. And those officers? What happened to them? Nothing public, I said. 2 were quietly retired. 1 was reassigned to a diplomatic post. And the ringleader disappeared, officially killed in an accident. But the reality? We never found a body, and the money trail vanished into offshore shells before we could pin it down. Orion's files were sealed, and we were ordered never to mention it again. Roe's jaw tightened. Because if it leaked, the public would see the military turning its weapons into contraband. I nodded. Exactly. But I'm telling you now because whoever is framing me is using the same methods. The clock drifts, the missing logs, the stolen vendor token. It feels too familiar. That network isn't dead. Someone from that operation survived, and now they're covering their tracks the same way we once exposed them. Ethan looked up sharply. You're suggesting someone at the general officer level might still be involved? I didn't hesitate. Yes, and they're powerful enough to make my own father believe I'm the enemy. Harris has always lived by chain of command. If someone at his level told him I was compromised, he would accept it as gospel. He's not my enemy, but he's being used. Roe exhaled through his nose, his arms crossing in a way that made the decorations on his sleeve glint. He wasn't used to doubt. Yuri, if you're right, I can't just walk into a Joint Chiefs meeting and accuse unnamed ghosts. But I also can't ignore the evidence Ethan uncovered. If these people are still embedded, they could compromise more than you. They could cripple the chain of command entirely. That's why you're hesitating, I said quietly. Because one wrong move and it blows back on the Navy, on the entire Department of Defense. But you need to understand, this isn't about me clearing my name anymore. This is about stopping them before they plant someone higher. Ethan tapped his notebook. Roe, we can cross-reference the shell corporations we tracked 10 years ago with the supply contracts Calder authorized recently. If the same entities appear, that's your probable cause. You don't have to go public yet. You just have to keep Yuri alive and buy us time. Roe's eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw not suspicion, but a glimmer of reluctant trust. If I shield you now, I put my career in their crosshairs. But I also know the men and women of Orion never walked away from a fight unfinished. If you're one of them, you'll see this through. Are you ready for that? I straightened, shoulders square. I've been ready since the day they branded me with the Orion mark. I didn't choose this tattoo for decoration. It was a vow. And I don't break vows. He nodded slowly. Then we proceed carefully. Ethan, start tracing those contracts. Uri, you stay in the compartment I set up for you. If this leaks further, you'll be a target for more than character assassination. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You're siding with her? Rose's reply was measured, but resolute. I'm not siding with anyone. I'm hedging against the possibility that the United States military has a cancer in its core. And if that's true, I'll burn my own stars to cut it out. He stood and walked to the door, but paused with his hand on the frame. Uri, you have 72 hours. Use them well. After that, I won't be able to protect you without evidence I can drop on the table like a hammer. I nodded once. I'll get you the hammer, Admiral. Just be ready to swing it when the time comes. As the door shut behind him, Ethan looked at me with something between admiration and fear. Uri, you just declared war on ghosts. I allowed myself the smallest of grim smiles. Then I'll hunt them like one. Ethan and I had barely begun to map out our plan when the room's intercom crackled. Admiral Rose's voice came through, colder than before. Uri, turn on Channel 5 now! Ethan grabbed the remote and flicked on the wall monitor. My breath caught the instant the footage filled the screen. There I was, clear as day, stepping through the reinforced doors of a remote weapons depot. The timestamp was from 48 hours before the explosion that had killed 5 men and obliterated an entire stockpile of classified ordnance. The same explosion I was being accused of engineering. The video zoomed in with clinical precision, pausing as I glanced toward the camera. My face was unmistakable. No, Ethan muttered, leaning forward. This doesn't make sense. Uri, you weren't anywhere near that depot. You were debriefing after the extraction op. I was in the room with you. I clenched my jaw, my pulse pounding in my ears. That's not me. Not really. Look closer at the shadows, the way the frame jitters. This was composited. The feed cut back to the news anchor, her tone sharp and grave. Military sources confirm the woman in this footage is Ursula Uri Kane, a former member of the Orion Phantom Unit. Intelligence officials believe she used her training to sabotage the depot, eliminating key evidence tied to the recent attacks. Her motives remain unclear, but high-level sources confirm she is considered armed and dangerous. Ethan muted the television, running a hand through his hair. This will be everywhere within the hour. Whoever is behind this isn't just trying to discredit you. They're burying you alive. I forced myself to breathe evenly, forcing the panic down. They're using Orion's playbook, the deepfake framework, the code that rewrites surveillance feeds, the misdirection. This is exactly how we made high-value targets vanish a decade ago. Now they're turning it on me. The door to the secured room opened abruptly, and Admiral Rose strode in, flanked by 2 armed MPs. His expression was like stone. Uri, I vouched for you. I suspended judgment when every other flag officer wanted you in cuffs. But after this, I met his stare without flinching. You think I blew up that depot? Sir, you've seen my service record. You know exactly where I was at the time of the blast. He didn't answer right away. He was a man weighing the weight of evidence against the brittle tether of trust. Finally, he said, Your father just called me. He's convinced now more than ever that you're compromised. He demanded I turn you over to Army CID immediately. Ethan stepped in front of me. Ro, this footage is doctored. Uri couldn't have been there. I can pull the raw metadata and prove. Prove? Ro cut him off. Do you understand how the Joint Chiefs operate, Cole? Once the narrative is set, it becomes gospel. Every minute I keep Yuri here, I risk my command being accused of obstruction. If I cave to Harris, she's gone, and you'll never see her again except in a courtroom. I stepped forward, forcing my voice steady. Sir, if you hand me over now, they win. They'll disappear me just like they disappeared the Orion files, and they'll erase whatever thread of truth we've managed to find. Rose studied me in silence, then said, Uri, the world is watching a video that shows you entering a facility that killed 5 American soldiers. Even if I believe you, I can't protect you indefinitely. Do you understand what's at stake? I nodded once. Completely. And that's why you need to let me vanish on my own terms. Ethan spun around. What? Uri, you can't just disappear. That's exactly what they want. No, I said, already pulling a map of the depot's surrounding region into my mind. What they want is for me to sit still and wait for a tribunal. But I'm going to hunt them instead. That video was staged, but the people who staged it had to use real facilities, real systems. If I find their next move before they can fabricate another, I can pull the mask off in front of the entire chain of command. Rose's eyes narrowed. You're asking me to look the other way? I'm asking you to do exactly what you've already been doing, Admiral, I said. Buy me time. You have 72 hours left on that clock. Use them to keep Harris at bay. Meanwhile, I'll go straight to the source. Roe hesitated, then barked at the MPs to step back. Yuri, if you're caught, I won't be able to stop them from locking you in a hole so deep you'll never climb out. I gave him a grim smile. I've escaped deeper holes than that. As Roe left the room, Ethan grabbed my arm. Yuri, this is insane. They're erasing you from the system. Once you're out there, you'll have no backup, no network, just targets on your back. That's fine, I said, my voice low, steel-edged. Because I know exactly how they think. And the one thing Orion taught me better than anyone else is how to become the ghost they can't catch. I looked back at the frozen image of my face on the screen, the fake me walking toward the depot, and felt the familiar burn of resolve settle deep in my chest. They want to erase me? Let's see how they handle it when the ghost hunts back. Once Roe left and the MPs had been reassigned to the far corridor, I finally had the breathing room I needed. The small isolation suite wasn't exactly friendly to covert operations. There were cameras tucked into every corner and a sensor grid sweeping for wireless activity. But the Orion Phantom unit had trained me to operate under far worse conditions. I sat on the edge of the steel-framed cot, rolling my shoulders like I was merely restless, while my hands worked beneath the mattress. The microspike I'd embedded in my boot heel years ago clicked free with a flick of pressure. It was a self-contained data tool designed to hijack secure nodes through even the most isolated terminals. Ethan had left behind his tablet during his frantic arguments earlier. I slipped the spike into its port, covering the motion with the crook of my arm as I pretended to rub at my temple. A low vibration hummed through the device. The bypass software was forcing its way into the Pentagon's intranet, using dormant credentials only Orion veterans would remember existed. The interface came alive, scrolling lines of data like rain. I filtered through logins, encrypted memos, and personnel transfers, narrowing my focus to the security review report surrounding the weapons depot explosion. My heart ticked harder when a directory surfaced that should not have existed. Project Lamia. I tapped in deeper, bypassing firewalls with muscle memory. The files were sparse, most of the metadata scrubbed, but one document was still intact, a roster. I scanned the names, expecting the usual list of contractors and field operatives. Instead, my father's adjutant, Colonel Nathan Marwick, stared back at me in bold letters. I whispered his name under my breath, almost disbelieving. Marwick had been at my father's side for 2 decades, a loyal shadow who carried out Harris's orders without question. He'd been the one barking at MPs during my arrest, spitting accusations like venom. But there was more. Another directory showed encrypted transfers routed through shell corporations linked to Marwick, payments from accounts that tied directly back to the same arms syndicate Orion had dismantled 10 years ago. My gut went cold. Uri, Ethan's voice came from behind me. I hadn't heard him slip back in. He closed the door quietly and stepped closer. You're not supposed to be on that system. I turned the screen toward him, my voice flat. Marwick. He's not just Harris's lapdog. He's been funneling money from the same weapons ring Orion exposed. And look at the authorizations. He had clearance to access the depot that exploded. Ethan crouched beside me, jaw tightening. Roe needs to see this. No, I said sharply. Roe's name is all over this directory. He's not implicated directly, but his clearances were used as cover for several of these authorizations. Someone is using his identity as a shield. If I show him now, he'll either panic and shut this down, or he'll confront Harris and Marwick too early. We need more than a name on a list. We need proof they can't bury. Ethan hesitated. Yuri, you can't take this on alone. They'll anticipate every move you make. They'll anticipate the old me, I said quietly, watching the cursor hover over the last folder. But Orion didn't just train me to shoot straight. They taught me how to live in the shadows. Marwick thinks he's erased the trail, but there's always residue. Payment schedules, courier manifests, dead drops. He's gotten sloppy, too confident under Harris's protection. The door beeped twice, signaling an incoming override. I yanked the spike free, shoving it back into my boot as Ethan powered down the tablet. Admiral Rowe stepped into the room seconds later, his face a mask of command authority. Uri, he said curtly, you'll be transferred to a more secure facility tonight. Harris insists. I gave him a neutral nod, though my chest tightened. A transfer meant fewer options, fewer cracks in the armor. I needed to move now. Rowe's gaze lingered, as if he sensed the storm under my surface. 72 hours, Kane. That's all I can hold them off for. Don't make me regret this. As he left, Ethan whispered urgently, What now? I slipped my boots back on and stood tall. Now we make Marwick show his hand, I said. And when he does, we'll have everything we need to take the entire network down. The tattoo on my back itched faintly under my shirt, the Orion symbol burning like a brand of purpose. Whoever had framed me underestimated the fact that ghosts like me never stop hunting. They brought me into the chamber under full escort, though I refused to let the optics shake me. The room was filled with senior officers, analysts, and legal counsel, all cloaked in the polished coldness of the Pentagon. Cameras were not allowed inside, but I could feel the media frenzy vibrating beyond the walls. The Traitor's hearing was already dominating every outlet. Admiral Rowe sat at the far end of the table, eyes trained on me with the same sharp focus he'd shown in our earlier meeting. To his right was General Harris, my father, his face lined with fury. He didn't look at me as his daughter. I was a liability, a stain on the Harris name. Rowe opened the session with a clipped explanation of the charges: unauthorized contact with foreign nationals, breach of classified operations data, possible collusion in the destruction of a U.S. weapons depot. He asked me to confirm my name and service record. Commander Ursula Kane, I said, my voice steady. Formerly attached to the Orion Phantom unit, operating under direct presidential authorization. General Harris slammed his palm on the table. She's hiding behind ghosts. Orion was decommissioned years ago. That unit doesn't exist anymore. It does if you understand the chain of command, Rowe said firmly. And until we have all the facts, this tribunal will refrain from making premature declarations. Harris leaned forward, eyes like sharpened steel. Premature? She's compromised entire operations. She's been photographed at the blast site. We should be stripping her commission and confining her, not wasting time debating. I let him finish before speaking. Sir, I said, using his rank with the same detachment he'd shown me. The photograph you're referencing was manipulated. There are timestamps embedded in the metadata that place me over 200 miles away at the time of the explosion. Admiral Rowe has seen the evidence. Rowe nodded slowly. I have, he confirmed, though it didn't resolve the tension. The room buzzed with voices, some agreeing with Harris, others calling for deeper investigation. Outside reporters were broadcasting speculation by the minute. I could hear fragments of their commentary through the walls when the door opened for a new observer. Hero or traitor? Kane's tattoo linked to the Orion program. The Pentagon divided? The session stretched on for hours, punctuated by heated exchanges. Harris pushed relentlessly for immediate action, while Rowe fought to preserve the integrity of the process. When the motion to suspend my commission indefinitely was raised, I stood. You can suspend me, I said, scanning the faces around me. But the person you're protecting will still be inside this room. You think I'm your threat, but the real traitor is counting on that blindness. If you throw me away now, you're handing them everything they want. The silence that followed wasn't agreement, but doubt had been planted. Rowe's hand slammed the gavel. We adjourn until further notice, he said. Commander Kane remains in temporary custody pending final review. The hearing was over, but the war had just begun. The next session was smaller, more controlled. Only a handful of key officers were present, including Colonel Nathan Marwick, my father's ever-loyal adjutant. He stood stiffly at attention behind Harris's chair, his hands clasped like a soldier carved from stone. I waited until the right moment, then asked a question I knew would pierce him. Colonel Marwick, I said, turning slightly in my seat, do you remember the Lisbeth operation? The arms cache in Eastern Europe, 2013? His jaw tightened, just enough to confirm my suspicion. That operation is classified, he said coolly, and you are in no position to— You shouldn't even know the name, I interrupted, cutting him off. The mission was Black Tier Orion, no conventional personnel briefed, and yet you just flinched. Rowe's eyes narrowed as he studied Marwick. Colonel? He asked, his voice a warning. Marwick didn't falter this time. She's baiting me, Admiral. It's what she does. But I could see the sweat gathering at his collar, the careful control fraying at the edges. I pressed harder. You remember because you were there, just not on our side. That's why the arms syndicate never collapsed completely. You've been keeping their pipeline alive all these years, and now you're framing me to cover the trail. Harris shot to his feet. That's enough, Yuri. His voice cracked through the chamber like gunfire. How dare you accuse my most trusted officer of treason? Because he's guilty, I said, locking eyes with Marwick. And the longer you ignore that, the deeper this rot spreads through the command you swore to uphold. Rowe said nothing, but the suspicion was written across his face now. He knew the tells. Marwick was rattled, and it was undeniable. The colonel finally broke eye contact, staring down at the table. She's lying, he said hoarsely. But it was too late. Rowe had seen the same cracks I had. That night, Harris came to see me alone. No guards, no witnesses. Just the man who had raised me standing on the other side of the glass partition. His face was lined with anger, but there was something else buried deep in his expression. You've destroyed this family, he said quietly, his voice tight. Do you have any idea what you've done? Our name, our honor, is in the dirt because of you. I stepped closer, my hands resting on the cool surface between us. No, Dad, I said softly. You destroyed it the moment you decided I was nothing but a reflection of your ambition. You've never once seen me as a human being. His fists clenched. I pushed you because I wanted you to be strong. Everything I did was for this family's legacy. I shook my head. No. You did it for yourself, and because of that, you can't even see the traitor standing next to you. You're so busy protecting your reputation that you're blind to what Marwick really is. For the first time, he hesitated. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but pride crushed it almost immediately. "You've changed, Yuri," he said coldly. "I don't even recognize you anymore." I met his gaze, my voice calm. "That's because you never really knew me in the first place." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. Harris stepped back, his shoulders rigid. "This is your last chance to salvage what's left," he said. "Admit what you've done, and I'll fight to keep you out of prison." I didn't flinch. I won't confess to crimes I didn't commit. And when the truth comes out, Dad, I hope you'll finally understand just how wrong you've been. He left without another word, and I stood alone, the weight of our fractured bond pressing harder than any accusation. But I couldn't let it break me. The fight wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about proving that the values I'd been taught to serve still meant something. And I was running out of time. Ethan and I met in the narrow fluorescent-lit interview room where I'd been allowed occasional legal consultations. This time, there was no time for pleasantries. "We have to turn this around now," Ethan said, leaning forward. He slid a secure tablet across the table. "I can inject false intel into the Pentagon's secondary system. Something juicy enough that Marwick won't be able to resist accessing it. If he moves on it, we'll have him on record." I stared at the glowing screen, thinking through the risks. "And if he's careful? Then we're back to square one," Ethan said. "But I don't think he's careful right now. He's desperate. That makes him sloppy." I nodded slowly. "Fine, let's bait the hook." We crafted the perfect lure, a classified data packet supposedly containing the only surviving inventory from the destroyed weapons depot. The file's metadata was designed to appear authentic, but in reality, it would trace every keystroke and network hop back to whoever accessed it. Hours later, the trap was set. I sat back in my holding area, heart pounding, as I monitored a small receiver Ethan had smuggled in. It would ping once when the decoy file was opened, twice when the trace completed. The first ping came less than 30 minutes later. I closed my eyes, barely allowing myself to exhale. The second ping followed almost instantly. Ethan's voice buzzed through a secure line. "We've got him." Marwick accessed the file from a restricted terminal in Harris's wing. He even tried to copy it onto an encrypted drive. "That's enough to flag him?" I asked. Ethan hesitated. "It's enough to implicate him, but not to take down the entire network. We still need the smoking gun." My jaw tightened. "Then we go get it." Breaking out of the secure holding wing wasn't about brute force. It was about timing, precision, and exploiting every weakness I'd memorized since being brought there. I waited until the changeover between night watch shifts. The guard rotation left a 90-second gap where cameras were recalibrated and blind spots overlapped. Using a small strip of reflective tape Ethan had passed me, I tricked the motion sensors into reading static movement in the corridor, buying precious seconds. The first locked door required bypassing a keypad. I didn't have the code, but I knew the rhythm of the guard's keystrokes. During my time in Orion, I'd learned to read patterns by sound. 3 attempts later, the light flickered green. I slipped out into the labyrinth of the Pentagon sublevels, every step measured. I couldn't afford to be caught. My destination, the classified data vault where high-tier evidence was stored. Ethan had given me the floor plan, but the vault was a fortress, guarded by biometric locks, thermal scanners, and constant surveillance. I improvised. When a maintenance crew passed through, I blended into their column, hard hat pulled low. My posture was different, my expression unreadable, but I walked like I belonged. Inside the vault corridor, I peeled away from the group, ducking behind a wall panel. Using a thermal reader I jury-rigged from a sensor in the holding room, I traced the heat signature of the keypad. The last 4 digits glowed faintly. One more guess, and the vault door clicked open. I stepped into a room lined with servers and sealed crates. The air was cold, humming with the energy of classified secrets. For a moment, I just listened. There were no footsteps, no alarms. Yet, Uri, Ethan's voice whispered in my earpiece, once you find the files, you have less than 6 minutes before the system flags unauthorized access. Make it count. I moved fast, navigating the digital archive like it was second nature. Orion had trained me to think like a machine. Search parameters, code keys, cross-references. And then I saw it, hidden behind layers of encryption, a directory linked to Marwick and 4 other senior officers. I downloaded everything onto a secure drive. And then I found the file that changed everything. The document was extensive. Financial transfers, weapons inventories, even correspondences linking Marwick's group to an international arms syndicate. Each line of text was a dagger, implicating him deeper and deeper. But one detail froze me. Among the names listed in the conspiracy was my father's. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice hollow. "Harris is in here." He was silent for a moment. Could they have fabricated that to muddy the water? I scanned the timestamps, the authorizations. "No," I said finally. "This isn't forged. He signed off on arms shipments he couldn't have believed were legitimate. They used him, but he let them. He wanted to believe Marwick was loyal. He looked the other way." I swallowed the lump in my throat. This was the evidence we needed, but it also confirmed the worst fear I'd been holding back. My father hadn't just doubted me. His pride had blinded him so completely that he'd helped the enemy. "Uri," Ethan said softly, "you need to bring this in now. We can't lose this window." I pocketed the drive and started back through the vault, my pulse a steady drumbeat. Every corner felt sharper, every shadow a threat. As I neared the exit, a figure appeared in the hallway. Marwick himself, flanked by 2 armed guards. "Well," he said, his smile predatory, "I was wondering how long it would take you to crawl out of your hole." I didn't flinch. "I guess you're not as smart as you think," I said, stepping forward. He raised a hand, and the guards leveled their weapons. "You're walking out of here in cuffs," he said. "You really should have stayed in that cell." But I had one last card to play. I slipped the small transmitter from my sleeve and tapped it. Ethan's voice cut through the hallway's silence, amplified by the intercom system he'd hacked. "Colonel Nathan Marwick," Ethan announced. "You are currently broadcasting live to Admiral Rowe's command center, and you've just threatened a commander of the United States Navy." Marwick's face drained of color. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other, unsure whether to obey his order or stand down. I held up the drive, letting them see it. "This contains everything," I said. "Financial records, weapons trails, comms. You can arrest me now and watch your careers burn with him, or you can get out of my way." The guards stepped aside. Marwick didn't move, but I could see the panic rising behind his eyes. I walked past him, my boots echoing against the polished floor. For the first time in days, I felt control returning, not just over the mission, but over my life. Now I had the evidence, and I was going to make sure the world saw it. I walked into the secure Pentagon chamber with every pair of eyes on me. My boots clicked softly against the marble floor, but the silence was deafening. I held the evidence drive in my right hand, my grip firm. Admiral Rowe was at the head of the table, flanked by senior officers. General Harris sat on the opposite side, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on the table as if he already knew what was coming. I stopped in the center of the room. "I have the truth," I said, my voice steady, clear. Without waiting for permission, I set the drive on the conference table and looked straight at Rowe. "This contains records of arms trafficking, data manipulation, and conspiracies involving members of this very council." Rowe gave a curt nod to the tech officer, who inserted the drive into the encrypted system. A wall of screens lit up with documents, financial transfers, and intercepted communications. The evidence filled the chamber like a cold wind. Gasps broke out when the first name appeared, Colonel Marwick. But as the files scrolled further, more names followed, names that carried weight and prestige within the military's highest circles. My father's name appeared in bold next to multiple authorizations. General Harris raised his head, his face pale, and for a moment I saw the man who had once taught me to salute. He stood abruptly, fists clenching. "This is fabricated," he barked, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's not," I said quietly. "I pulled this from the Pentagon's own data vault, cross-referenced with Orion archives. These signatures are real. You authorized shipments that disappeared into Marwick's network. Whether you knew the full scope or not, you enabled them." The room was spinning with murmurs. Some officers looked stunned, others defensive. Rowe finally raised his hand, silencing everyone. "We are not here for theatrics," he said. "We are here for the truth, and we have it in front of us." I looked at my father then. His eyes were hollow. For years, I dreamed of earning his respect, of hearing him say he believed in me. But now, standing in front of him with the weight of betrayal between us, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Rowe ordered the evidence cross-examined by a forensic team. But even before the results returned, General Harris rose slowly from his seat. I didn't know it would go this far," he said, his voice low and broken. When I turned to face him, heart pounding. "You signed the authorizations, Dad. You pushed for my removal. Why?" He rubbed a trembling hand over his face. "They came to me 2 years ago," he said. "Marwick and others. They said if I didn't help eliminate potential threats, they would destroy me, ruin my career, my reputation, everything I'd worked for. They told me you were compromised, that Orion was a liability. They showed me doctored files, proof you'd gone rogue." My breath caught in my throat. He had believed them. He had believed lies about his own daughter, because his pride and fear left no room for trust. "I thought I was protecting the family's honor," Harris said, voice cracking. "But I was their pawn. They used me to isolate you, to frame you, to keep Orion buried forever." The admission hit me harder than any accusation. My father hadn't simply doubted me. He had been manipulated into becoming a weapon against me. I felt a flicker of anger, then sorrow, then something deeper. The hollow grief of realizing the man I had once trusted would never be the same. "They threatened you," I said softly, "but you still made a choice." Harris nodded slowly, unable to meet my eyes. "I know," he whispered, "and I'll carry that shame until the day I die." The officers in the room shifted uncomfortably, witnessing the quiet destruction of a man who had once seemed untouchable. Rowe's expression was unreadable, but his eyes flicked to me, waiting for how I would respond. I straightened my shoulders. "Then let's end it," I said. "Marwick and his network need to be dismantled. Completely." Rowe stood, his posture commanding the room into silence. "Colonel Nathan Marwick," he said sharply, "you are under arrest." 2 military police officers stepped forward to restrain Marwick, who had been sitting stone-faced at the far end of the table. As they cuffed him, his mask cracked, rage spilling from his features. "You think this ends with me?" he shouted. "You're all naive. The system you serve will eat you alive." Rowe ignored him. "Remove him," he ordered. The MPs dragged Marwick out. Rowe then turned to the rest of the room, his voice unwavering. "The men and women of Orion Phantom Unit gave their lives in the shadows so this country could sleep in peace. And we failed them. Today, that failure ends." He looked directly at me. "Captain Ursula Harris, call sign Valkyrie, you are hereby reinstated to full honors. Your record is cleared, your name restored. You are an asset this nation cannot afford to lose." For a moment, I couldn't speak. After weeks of isolation, humiliation, and betrayal, the words felt surreal. "Thank you, Admiral," I managed, my voice firm but low. Rowe's gaze softened. "You didn't just save yourself," he said. You saved the integrity of the institution we all serve, and for that, we owe you more than medals. I glanced at my father, who sat slumped in his chair, the weight of his decisions crushing him. He wouldn't be arrested. Rowe had already made it clear Harris had been manipulated. But the punishment was its own kind of sentence. As I stepped out of the chamber, the corridor seemed brighter than it had in days. I wasn't naive enough to believe the fight was over. Marwick's network extended beyond the walls of the Pentagon. But for the first time, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt free. Now, it was time to decide what to do with that freedom. The day after the final hearing, I received a message that my father wanted to see me. I almost ignored it. Part of me felt that nothing he could say would undo what had been done. But something deeper, something that felt like closure, made me go. He was waiting in one of the small conference rooms of the Pentagon, stripped of the authority that had once surrounded him like armor. When I entered, he stood slowly, his posture heavy, his uniform replaced by civilian clothes. He looked older, smaller somehow, as if the weight of shame had shrunk him. Uri, he said quietly, thank you for coming. I didn't sit. What do you want, Dad? He hesitated before speaking, as though choosing each word carefully. I came to apologize, he said. I was blinded by the family name, by the idea that our legacy was all that mattered. I let fear guide me, and it cost me my daughter's trust. I see that now. I kept my expression neutral. You believed lies about me. You let them turn you against me. Do you even know how close they came to destroying me? He flinched, his voice breaking slightly. I do. And I'll live with that guilt for the rest of my life. I don't expect forgiveness, Ursula, but I needed you to hear me say this. I was wrong. There was a long silence between us. I remembered the countless times he drilled into me that strength was everything, that weakness was shame. And now, here he was, bearing his weakness for the first time. I don't need the family's honor, I said finally, my voice steady. I don't need you to fight for it anymore. All I ever wanted was the truth. That's all I ever wanted from you, Dad. His eyes shimmered with unshed tears. He nodded slowly, accepting my words. I understand, he whispered. I turned to leave, but something made me pause at the doorway. I hope you can forgive yourself someday, I said quietly, because I'm done carrying that weight for you. He looked at me then, as if seeing me for the first time, not as a soldier, not as a reflection of his ambition, but as a woman who had survived despite him. He opened his mouth to speak, but I was already gone. 6 months later, my life looked nothing like it had before. I had officially resigned from the military, walking away from the world that had defined me since I was 19. Instead, I founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting veterans who, like me, had been discarded by the system they once served. Our small office was in a converted warehouse in Virginia. The walls were lined with photos of men and women who had served in silence, their names often forgotten. Every morning, I came in early to brew coffee and review grant applications, learning skills that had nothing to do with weapons or missions. One afternoon, Admiral Rowe arrived unannounced. He stepped into my office, still carrying the quiet authority that made people sit straighter. You're hard to find these days, he said with a faint smile. I gestured for him to sit. I'm not hiding, I said, just building something new. He looked around the room, nodding in approval. You've built something good, he said. Then his expression turned serious. But I have an offer for you, Yuri. Orion Phantom Unit is being reactivated, and I want you to command it. No one is more qualified than you. The words hit me harder than I expected. There was a time when that offer would have meant everything to me. But now, I knew the cost. Admiral, I said slowly, I appreciate the trust, but I'm done living in the shadows. I've spent too many years fighting wars no one ever saw, carrying secrets no one was meant to know. I can do more good here." Rose studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "I thought you might say that," he said. "Still, the offer stands, and for what it's worth, I'm proud of you." Something softened in my chest. "Thank you," I said. He rose to leave, but stopped at the door. "You remind me of why we fight," he said quietly. "Don't forget that." When he left, I sat back at my desk, looking at the photos on the wall. My life no longer revolved around missions or titles. I wasn't a soldier anymore, and I didn't need to be. I was building something lasting, something that couldn't be stripped away with a torn uniform. And for the first time in years, I felt at peace. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel. Not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you. And remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.